The Lord is my light and my salvation. Whom shall I fear? The Lord is the strength of my life. Of whom shall I be afraid? That is our new memory verse. And I know it does not include the word hope. However, when you are putting God in charge of your life, then you have hope. So I just noticed it did not get up on the website. I did send it in, but of course I did send it in on Friday. So hopefully that will be there on Monday for our new memory verse along with our new monthly message. Our first hymn this afternoon is taken from page 461, Open My Eyes That I May See, and we'll sing the first and fourth verses. We'll continue with page 456, just a few pages before that. 4, 5, 6, and we'll sing the first and third verses of I'd Rather Have Jesus. The announcements are tomorrow morning at 7 o'clock over WBSM 1420 AM 99.5 FM is the Happy Bible Hour, continuing on in the book of John. And then Tuesday evening here at the church, and it will be broadcast live over Facebook, is the service for the Day of Atonement. And that is, of course, our fast day, and that starts sunset on Tuesday night and goes through sunset on Wednesday night. So that service again here will be Tuesday evening at 7 o'clock, and yes, we will be on Facebook. So that will be there for you to see. We, of course, in our announcements on the Happy Bible Hour, we do let people know we have Bibles available, and if you know someone in your family or someone that you talk to that doesn't have a Bible and they would like one, we do have some available. But that tab is also on our website, which is peopleschristian.com. And other than that, we do have the Feast of Tabernacles coming up, and just so that you can keep those in mind, Tabernacles, the services will be October 9th and October 16th. So those are both Sunday evenings. So we will have, after Tuesday night service, we will have two more on the Sundays, and those are the Feast of Tabernacles.
There is a service Tuesday, right?
Tuesday, yes, this Tuesday at 7 o'clock, yes. And the other thing that I am announcing is just because one of my jobs as the pastor of the church is to be your shepherd, I guess. And a shepherd takes care of his sheep, so I don't expect you all to stop barring now, but, you know, I am told I should take care of you. And one of the things that I do in my spare time is I study a lot about health, and health in general. And so I am going to give you some things that many of you probably already know, but you should be doing on a regular basis. Get enough sleep. Get out in the sun. Don't sit in your house all day. Get out and get some sun. Take your sunglasses off. As the doctor said, your eyeballs are the solar panels of your body, so take your sunglasses off when you go out in the sun. Drink plenty of water, and that's not just one glass a day, and that doesn't include the coffee that you're drinking. Drink a lot of water, always have it. You're supposed to drink a half of your weight in water, but I certainly don't. The more you weigh, the more you have to drink. It gets a little difficult. But anyway, yes, drink plenty of water. And get rid of stress. That's difficult, I know. But as much as you can, laugh and have positive conversations with people. Get out in nature. So those are all normal things we can do that don't cost a penny. That doesn't cost a penny. But the next thing is, as we well know, our food is depleted from vitamins and minerals. So there are certain vitamins and minerals that you should be getting in your body that you don't get from foods, because if you did, you would have to eat a ridiculous amount of them. And I'm just going to give you, I think, just 3. Yeah, just 3. Zinc is important, but in order for zinc to attach itself to your body, you need magnesium. So you might want to get the zinc with magnesium. Vitamin D, because especially as the winter approaches, our body doesn't use the vitamin D that we have because we're not out in the sun, so make sure you take vitamin C, and even in the winter, go out in the sun. And especially vitamin C. Vitamin C affects every single organ in your body, including helping when you have major diseases like heart disease, diabetes, cancer. So get that vitamin C in. And I'm going to add to that, and this is the last thing, what you buy for your supplements needs to be plant-based, not synthetic. So if you went to CVS, Walgreens, and just grabbed vitamin C off the counter, more than likely that's not going to help you, because your body doesn't work well with synthetic things. It works well with plant-based, because guess what? Plants and humans were made by God. and he made them to work together. So that is my taking care of my flock for the afternoon. And just some little things that I have. And it's not just from one source. It's like every source I read says those same exact things. So it's coming from really everywhere that we need to make sure we're taking care of ourselves and be strong enough so that we can be good disciples. So we are, of course, in the book of Ruth. Just remember, it's Joshua, Judges, Ruth. It's a small book, so sometimes it gets kind of caught in between the First Samuel and Judges, and you can't find it. But we're going to read chapter 1, and we're going to start reading at verse 16 and go to the end of the chapter, although I do expect to get into chapter 2 today. So that's Ruth chapter 1, starting with verse 16. And Ruth said, "Entreat me not to leave thee, or to return from following after thee. For whither thou goest, I will go, and whither thou lodgest, I will lodge. Thy people shall be my people, and thy God my God. Where thou diest will I die, and there will I be buried. The Lord do so to me, and more also, if aught but death part thee and me." When she saw that she was steadfastly minded to go with her, then she left speaking unto her. So they two went until they came to Bethlehem. And it came to pass, when they were come to Bethlehem, that all the city was moved about them. And they said, "Is this Naomi?" And she said unto them, "Call me not Naomi, call me Mara, for the Almighty hath dealt very bitterly with me. I went out full, and the Lord hath brought me home again empty. Why then call ye me Naomi, seeing the Lord hath testified against me, and the Almighty hath afflicted me?" So Naomi returned, and Ruth the Moabitess, her daughter-in-law, with her, which returned out of the country of Moab, and they came to Bethlehem in the beginning of barley season. And may God add his blessing to this reading from his word. Let's continue to pray for those on the prayer list. We have checked in, a couple of us, my brother being one, with members from our church that are that have been in areas of a lot of rain and hurricanes and things. And so far, everybody is fine that we have checked in on. Of course, a lot of debris around and a lot of water, but everybody is safe. Excuse me. So we need to continue to remember all those in those states that were affected, and we know that there was some loss of life, and also to pray for those people that are doing the cleanup and the putting the electrical system back in place and so forth. They work hard and long hours, and so pray for their safety also. So let's look to God in prayer. Heavenly Father, we thank you this afternoon for giving us knowledge and watching over us, and for helping us realize that we are wonderfully made. Our bodies are so intricate, and our systems work together precisely, and it is only because you created us. And your creation goes from the smallest of molecules in our body to our vast system that we live in, this planet, the things beyond our planet. Everything just fits together in balance. And that is exactly because you created this balance. So we ask that you help us to be appreciative of all that you have created, and that we are good stewards of the temple that you have given us, our temple, our body, and that you help us to lead healthier lives so that we can be good disciples of yours, that if you call on us to go out into the world, that physically we'll be able to, because you have prepared us and you have given us the wherewithal to do so. I ask this afternoon, as usual, that you watch over and bless those that are sick, those that mourn, those with financial difficulties. I ask for many blessings on our governments throughout the world. I also ask for blessings and protection on our president and his family, along with the groups of people that we always pray for, our service personnel and their families, our first responders, volunteers, missionaries, Christians. They have many needs, but we also know that you know their needs better than we do. We ask that you watch over each of those groups and take care of them and keep them safe. And I also pray that every song that we sing this afternoon and every word that is said is to your name's honor and glory. In your Son's name, amen. Before the message on Ruth, we're going to sing page 398, the first and fourth verses of In the Service of the King. So last week we started the book of Ruth, and we found out that Ruth and her husband had moved out of Bethlehem because there was a famine, and they had moved to the land of the Moabites. They had two sons. Their two sons married Moabite women, and while they were there for approximately 10 years, both Naomi's husband and her two sons, relationships here, right, died. And so she is alone as a woman with her two daughters-in-law, and she decides that it is not the right thing for her to do. She's also heard that there's no more famine in Bethlehem. So she goes to her daughters-in-law and she tells them, I'm going to move back to Bethlehem. And there's a little discussion, and then Naomi decides it's probably not a good idea for them to move with her, because their customs are totally different. They worship idols in Moab, and she feels that they might not feel comfortable if they move back with her to Bethlehem. One of her daughters-in-law, Orpah, decides to stay, and she goes back to the house of her family. But Naomi decides to stay with Ruth and travel back with her to Bethlehem. Now, as we start in verse 16, this is the beautiful poetic response that Ruth says to Naomi, urging her not to ask her to go back. I have a feeling that Naomi was a little pushy in that she wanted them to stay, and not necessarily that she didn't want them with her. Excuse me, she just wanted to make sure they were comfortable and safe. And she insists that wherever Naomi would go, she would go with her. Wherever Naomi would live, that Ruth would go with her. She was going, this person, Ruth, this daughter-in-law, was going to a country that she had never been before. She would be far away from her own family and her own homeland and her own customs. And yet, this commitment in these few verses here show how she was actually happy to go with her mother-in-law. She was willing to accept Naomi's people as her own people, even though they were from a completely different nationality, and a nationality that hated many of her own people. So she really didn't know what she was going to be getting into. Everybody there could have treated her badly, but she was willing to devote herself to learning to live among them. She didn't go into this country expecting them to change their customs. She went into this country knowing that she was going to have to adapt. And so she was willing to do so, even though she probably knew there would be times when she would not be accepted by certain people, and that she might even be made fun of or put down, maybe because her accent wasn't quite the same. And so, but she was willing to do so because she had this love for her mother-in-law. And she continues on, and this I think is probably the most important part of this, is that we know from this that she had begun to believe in what is said as the one true God, to accept Naomi's God as her God. And this devotion sort of explains the determination to remain with Naomi. If she had begun to believe in God, it would have been difficult actually for her to stay in her own land, because they did not. It is especially essential to the rest of the story to understand that Ruth had come to believe in God. She also affirmed that she would continue with Naomi until death, and even be buried where Naomi would be buried. She was determined that nothing would tempt her to go back to her own family and her own land, that she would stay with Naomi even until death. This really amounts to a promise before God. She affirms that nothing but death would part her from Naomi. So on hearing her response, Naomi realized that Ruth was determined to go with her, and she stopped asking her to stay. We know that these verses are often quoted in wedding ceremonies as a beautiful expression of devotion of a husband and wife. But obviously, in this case, it was spoken of the devotion of a daughter-in-law to her mother-in-law. It does express the beauty of a strong family. And I think that's one of the problems with what we're seeing in the world today, is our family unit is no longer strong. And I'm not saying everyone. There are people in the world that keep their family strong. They eat together, they care about each other, they know the whereabouts of each other. But oftentimes, everyone's too busy to care. And they could be together in the same home, but not necessarily together. Everybody in their different rooms, everybody on their different devices. And so they're not really together. They're not having discussions. They're not laughing together. I can honestly say that every single meal that we have together as a family, we laugh. And we laugh hard, mainly because of someone that shall not be named. But we do laugh at every time we're together. The importance of laughter is key. You really do have to have a good time in your life. And so the idea that this family unit can stay together no matter who's there. We do lose loved ones along the way that weren't there that were there before and they're no longer there. Oftentimes that means the family breaks apart, but it doesn't have to. You can keep the family unit together, and it shows that it's very important for us to support each other. And if we move that out a little bit from a relation family, people that are related to each other, to our church family, we even have a stronger bond. Because we know we have people that we can turn to and go to and be supported by. And that's really important. And I think that was really important to Naomi. She knew she was going to make this long trek back to her home. And she was thinking she was going to have to do it alone. And then when she got there, what was she going to do? She had nothing really. She's a woman. So in that period of time, she really couldn't earn a living. She didn't know what she was going to do. She was going to be alone. So the fact that Ruth wanted, not just agreed to, but wanted to go with her was really important. It shows devotion, and it actually also describes the type of commitment that a Christian should have in following Jesus. Our devotion to him should be strong in everything we do and everything we say. So in verses 19 through 22, we are told that these two women returned from Moab to Israel, specifically Bethlehem. Naomi's family had been gone at least 10 years. She had faced many hardships, as we know. No doubt, being older, having gone through some difficulty, she probably looked a little different. But the people she had known in years past actually recognized her, and they greeted her with excitement. So that kind of tells you that, Naomi was probably a person that was a friend to many, and because they were happy to see her. We know we all have those relatives that if they come to our door, we're not so happy to see. But Naomi was one that her family, her friends were happy to see her. They asked her, though, to make sure, "Are you Naomi?" And she responded to them by asking them not to call her Naomi, but Mara. Now, Naomi, the name Naomi means pleasant, which kind of goes to show you that when she left, she was pleasant. Oftentimes, the names of people, especially in the Old Testament, refer to who they were. Mara means bitter. So we can tell that Naomi left, she did leave in completely different circumstances. But in the 10 years that had occurred during her leaving Bethlehem and then returning, she had gone from a very pleasant person to someone who was quite bitter because of the things that had happened to her. She explains to them why she wants her name changed. She tells them that God has dealt bitterly with her, that she had left her home with many blessings, but she returned quite empty, having lost all the family she had when she left. So she thought a better name for her, instead of pleasant, would be bitter. Why? In her mind, it was because God had chosen to afflict her. She doubtless did not really change her name, because through the rest of the book she is not referred to as Mara, but is referred to as Naomi. But she did this as kind of a dramatic entrance, expressing her grief and what she had gone through. This is another place, along with verse 13, where Naomi expressed her conviction that God had dealt with her bitterly. It wasn't just circumstances, it was God that had afflicted her and testified against her. This is how she viewed her circumstances. We're not told that that's what happened. We're not told that God did this. This is how she felt. And sometimes how you feel has a big outcome on what happens. If you can feel positive about something, then your outcome is probably going to be better. If you're going into surgery and you can go into surgery saying, I can trust my doctor, I know that God is watching over me, I know that people are praying for me, and I know that after this surgery, I am going to be better, guess what? You're going to be better. If you go into the surgery thinking, oh, I'm not so sure I should have picked this doctor, nobody cares what I'm going through, why am I doing this? Why don't I just, deal with it the way I have it and not have the surgery? It's going to hurt. I'm going to be in pain. Nothing's going to be different. Guess what? Nothing's going to be different. Or your recovery is going to be so much longer. Your attitude about life has a big effect on who you are and how you are. So Naomi was having what we would call today a bit of a pity party for herself. She probably hadn't done anything wrong, other than they had moved from Bethlehem to Moab. But was that Naomi's choice in those days? No. She did what Elimelech, her husband, told her to do. And it could have been that in the process of what God wanted to have happen, it could have been that he did do these things. But we don't know. It doesn't say. And it doesn't matter where our tribulations and trials and afflictions come from. A lot of times they're of our own accord because we've made a wrong decision or a wrong choice. You still have to deal with them the same way. You have to get through them. And hopefully you get through them in a positive manner. So Naomi just kind of, I think, because she changes a little bit, I think she just wanted to let everybody know what she had gone through. Like, yes, I'm returning here, but please feel sorry for me. I lost my husband, I lost my sons, and I have my daughter-in-law, but that's it. I'm coming back with absolutely nothing. And in the last of chapter 1, we're told that they had returned, that they were going to live in Bethlehem, and that it was the beginning of the barley harvest. About March, late March, early April. And this becomes an important fact as the story goes on. So what happens? So let's move into chapter 2. In chapter 2, verse 1, and Naomi had a kinsman of her husband's, a mighty man of wealth of the family of Elimelech, and his name was Boaz. So this chapter, we're introduced to a major character in this account of Ruth. His name, Boaz. We are told that he was a relative of Naomi's husband. And again, this relationship becomes of great significance as the account continues. We are also told that he is a man of great wealth. And at this point, this verse, we're just simply introduced to who he is. Verses 2 and 3. And Ruth the Moabitess said unto Naomi, Let me now go to the field and glean ears of corn after him in whose sight I shall find grace. And she said unto her, Go, my daughter. And she went and came and gleaned in the field after the reapers. And her hap was to limit on the part of the field belonging unto Boaz, who was the kindred of Elimelech. So we know, and we're not surprised at this fact, being the time that it was, that Ruth and Naomi are poor. They don't have food. They had left Bethlehem in the first place because of famine, and then all the males died, so that means their means of support was gone. In God's plan for a family, men are supposed to be the breadwinners, and especially during that time. So Ruth knows, she's younger, Ruth knows they have to find food somewhere. So she suggests to Naomi that she should go into the fields and glean the grain, whatever field she might find where people would allow her to do so. Naomi agrees. She's respecting Naomi as her mother. She's not just saying, I'm going to go to. She asks really permission to go. So Ruth went and gleaned in the field after the reapers. So to understand this story to the fullest, it is helpful to understand the concept of gleaning, especially under Old Testament law. The law required that when people would harvest their crops from their fields, any grain that fell to the ground must be left. This was a way of providing for the poor. For the poor, for the widows, for the orphans, and even for strangers that came through the land. Now, 3 of these categories would apply to Ruth. She was a widow, she was poor, and she was a stranger in that land. It was fully understood that those who lacked for themselves would be free to go into the fields and gather whatever grain had fallen onto the ground. This was called gleaning. This law applied to grain in the fields, or to grapes, or to olive trees. And you can find this in both Leviticus and Deuteronomy. This was their welfare system. What do we see with the difference between their welfare system and our welfare system? Did the people that were harvesting the grain, were they the ones that went and picked up the leftovers and handed it to the people that needed it? The people that needed it were expected to work. They were expected to do something for what they had been given. And all they were expected to do was collect it. To go out there into the field, it was not easy. It was hard work. You were picking up the leftovers. It wasn't like you were going through and getting the best of whatever crop it was. But you were expected to work for it. When you work for something, don't you appreciate it more? You do. You do. When you save up and save, you want to go on a vacation and you save up for it. And it might take you a few years and you finally go on that vacation that you want to go on, you're thrilled. As opposed to putting it on your charge card and paying the 22% or higher interest rate that you can't afford to pay to go on this vacation. The laws that God has for our finances and for feeding us, they make sense. That's what we should be doing now. Our welfare system in the United States did not start to take care of everybody. It started to take care of widows and orphans. That was it. It has developed into a whole nother story. A lot of fraud. Because you can. And you don't work for it. Like Ruth had to work for it. She had to go out into the field, in the sun, in the heat, in the rain, whatever, and go to the fields and get what it was that she and Naomi needed. So what do we learn about Ruth here? Well, first, she's standing by her commitment to stay with Naomi, isn't she? She could have said, this is more than I bargained for. If I'm in the house of my parents back in Moab, I'm not going to have to do this. I'm going to have meals put on the table for me. But she didn't. She actually brought it up to Naomi that she would go do this. It also shows her commitment to being part of Naomi's people, because she was going into the fields of these people she didn't know. Gleaning was hard work. But Ruth did not seek to go back or asked for other people to provide for them. She was willing to do the work that was needed to not only make sure she had food, but that also her mother-in-law had food. We see that Ruth was industrious. She was willing to humble herself to do a job that only the poor did. She did not lie in bed and complain about her lot. She did not think the job was beneath her dignity, even though it was likely a job she had never done before. She didn't go have her fingernails done instead. She didn't go buy the best of cell phones, the best of cars, or a donkey. But she was content in her lot. She was energetic, and she was determined to do what needed to be done. She didn't wait for someone else to do it for her. She got up and out, and did it for herself. Now, happenstance, I think not, but as Ruth went to glean, by chance she happened to glean in the field belonging to Boaz, that relative that we were introduced to in verse 1. This, of course, was the providence of God at work in their lives. And we begin to see the connection between Boaz and the well-being of Naomi and Ruth. Let's continue on and read verses 4 through 7. And behold, Boaz came from Bethlehem and said unto the reapers, The Lord be with you. And they answered him, The Lord bless thee. Then said Boaz unto his servant that was set over the reapers, Whose damsel is this? And the servant was set over the reapers answered and said, It is the Moabitish damsel that came back with Naomi out of the country of Moab. And she said, I pray you, let me glean and gather after the reapers among the sheaves. So she came and hath continued even from morning until now, that she tarried a little in the house. So we have to first remember Boaz is a wealthy man. He lived in Bethlehem. No doubt had many possessions. He had fields where he had workers. He wasn't doing the work, was he? So we know he has a little bit because he's not doing the work himself. He has hired workers that are gathering in the harvest. It tells us here that Boaz goes to visit the laborers to see how things are going. He's overseeing the job. It more than likely he lived in the Bethlehem proper in the city, and his fields were outside of the city, so he might have had to travel. Same thing that Ruth would have had to have done too. Would she have had to walk to get to these fields first? So from time to time, like a good owner would do, he went to visit the workers in the field. What's the first thing that Boaz says to his reapers? He doesn't say, how's the work going? Does he? Not at all. He says, the Lord be with you. He is obviously a good boss. He is concerned with the welfare of his workers, his employers. And obviously they respect him back because they answer with, the Lord bless thee. It shows that Boaz was a diligent and hard worker, because many rich people would leave it up to their hirelings to supervise the work of laborers. But it shows that Boaz was personally involved in meeting, supervising, and seeing firsthand what work was being done by his laborers. As he's observing the harvest, Boaz, of course, noticed Ruth. She's working in the fields. She's gleaning. So he asked the servant in charge of the reapers about her. Now, obviously, she had introduced herself to the laborers because the servant explains that she's the Moabite woman who came back with Naomi when they had returned from Moab. And that she had asked. She just didn't go do it. She just didn't barge in and say, I'm doing what the law says I can do. She asked first. And that she had worked diligently throughout the day, taking only a short rest in the house. So we learn here that Ruth was still a young woman. We don't really know how long Ruth had been married to her husband before he had died. It had to be sort of less than 10 years, or around 10 years at the most. But in any case, she was young enough when she married that she was still a young woman at this point in the story. We're again told that Boaz was a relative of Naomi's husband, and no doubt knew something about what Naomi had gone through and the circumstances around them. He probably even knew that she had gone, as in Naomi, and had gone to Moab and had returned. In any case, at this point, he has been introduced to Ruth, to whom he's related by marriage. So now we are introduced to the main characters in this account. We're going to see how Boaz plays a big, important part in everything that goes on. And we're going to also see how Ruth stays loyal, not just to Naomi, but to this God that she has adopted as her own, in how she acts and reacts, and what she does, and how she keeps herself. So far, this story is showing us a lot about, this account is showing us a lot about how we should live our lives today. How that we should really work for what we do and for what we get. And it's important that we do that. We shouldn't expect things to be handed to us. And when we become of retirement age and stop our job that gets us money to live, we should continue working more in the service of the King, becoming the disciples that maybe we didn't have time to do when we were busy raising our families or working our jobs or whatever it was we were doing. Ruth and Naomi have an amazing relationship. It becomes really mother and daughter, not mother-in-law and daughter-in-law. And they're both blessed by it. And we too can be blessed by our families. Sometimes we have to work at it, and sometimes it just comes naturally. But the family unit is so important. And if there are difficulties in the family, someone should step up and make sure that those are corrected. Because the family unit is what is important in the Christian life. It leads you closer to God, and it leads your family there also. Keep that in mind. You haven't seen somebody in a while that's part of your family? Invite them over. See how they're doing. If it's your children, definitely should. And if it's your church family, you should do the same also. Which leads us to our last hymn, which is found on page 677. And it is Blessed Be the Tie That Binds. And we're going to sing verses 1, 3, and 4. Verses 1, 3, and 4, 6, 7, 7. Let the words of my mouth and the meditation of my heart be acceptable in thy sight, O Lord, my strength and my redeemer. God is good all the time.